The Unfiltered Human on the Fringe episode 2. Lust in the mirror, desire, shame, and the fragmented self. In this episode, we open the door to one of the most powerful and misunderstood human forces, lust. Often buried beneath cultural shame, distortion, and silence, lust is rarely discussed with honesty or nuance. But like all shadow emotions, it deserves exploration, not for glorification, nor condemnation, but for understanding. Lust is not just about sex. It's about longing, attention, emotional hunger, validation, creativity, and sometimes a desperate desire to feel alive. When unconscious, it fragments relationships and distorts identity. When brought into awareness, it becomes a mirror, a reflection of our unmet needs, past wounds, and suppressed truths. In this episode, we combine psychological theory, cultural insight, and personal storytelling to navigate the terrain of lust. Each section ends with self-reflection prompts and insight triggers to deepen your journey. The unspoken urge, early imprints of lust developmental psychologists like Erik Erikson and Jean Piaget remind us that children absorb meaning through experience long before they can articulate it. Desire, attraction, and physical curiosity are not inherently sexual, but they are sensual and emotional, and those early encounters leave psychological footprints. Personal reflection. Around the age of 8, I felt drawn to a girl at school. We had a bond I couldn't quite explain, something beyond friendship, but without sexual undertones. I remember being confused and heartbroken when I learned she liked another boy. It was my first experience of rejection, raw and emotional. Later, around age 12, I had a surreal encounter in a drama class when a girl made overt physical contact with me in front of others. I felt shocked, aroused, and confused. When she later ignored me entirely, the experience stirred shame I couldn't process. That moment has stayed with me for decades, not as trauma, but as a symbol of how early experiences of lust are often met with confusion and silence. Insight prompt. When we are not given language or guidance for desire, we internalize confusion or shame. Self-reflection. What was your first memory of attraction or curiosity? Were you met with understanding, dismissal, or silence? The shadow split. What culture taught you Carl Jung called the shadow the parts of ourselves we repress or reject due to cultural, familial, or moral conditioning? For many, lust becomes part of that shadow because it's either overly glamorized or demonized. Rarely is it honored or contextualized. Personal reflection. Growing up, I was never directly taught about lust. What I did learn came from older male peers who introduced me to pornography and encouraged a shallow view of women. Sex was discussed in terms of conquest and humor, not love or intimacy. I didn't resonate with that mindset, but it affected how I viewed myself and others. Some people later accused me of being a player, not realizing I was often seeking connection, not conquest. Cultural insight. Philosopher Michel Foucault explored how societies regulate sexuality, not just through laws but through silence and taboo. When we can't talk about lust, we either suppress it or act it out unconsciously. Self-reflection. What unspoken rules about lust did you absorb? How do they shape how you express or repress desire? A clash of values, lust versus integrity. Lust often can collide with other internal systems, morality, identity, loyalty, or our hunger for something deeper. When we act in misalignment, we either spiral into guilt or rationalize behaviors that fracture our self-worth. Personal reflection. I've been accused of using people, even when I actively avoided shallow connections. I've turned down offers for purely physical interactions, even when tempted because I value integrity. It's frustrating to be misjudged, especially when you know your choices came from restraint, not recklessness. Many of those accusations were projections, people projecting their fears or past betrayals onto me. Theoretical insight. Projection is a defense mechanism where people attribute their feelings or intentions to others. Lust, when unacknowledged, is often projected onto others as shame or accusation. Self-reflection. Have you ever had your integrity questioned because someone else assumed lust or desire? Lust and projection. Sometimes we judge others not because of what they've done, but because of what their actions reveal about us. If we've repressed parts of our desire, another person's freedom might feel like a threat. Personal reflection. I've felt discomfort in relationships when learning about a partner's sexual history. not because I believed in judging their past, but because I hadn't fully come to terms with my insecurities. Was I envious of their experiences, or fearful I wasn't enough? The truth is, I had to learn not to personalize the past. Psychological insight, Judith Herman, in Trauma Studies, notes how shame and envy are often interlinked when sexuality is explored without consent or clarity in early life. Lust becomes distorted if we associate it with danger, rejection, or betrayal. Self-reflection. When have you judged someone's sexual expression? Was it truly about them, or about a part of you that felt unsafe, unseen, or unsure? The mirror effect. When confidence triggers insecurity. Another's physicality, confidence, or attention from others can stir unexpected emotions, admiration, envy, or discomfort. This is the mirror effect. We see in others what we've disowned in ourselves. Personal reflection. I've been made to feel guilty for receiving attention, even when I didn't seek it. I've also experienced double standards, where a partner was free to receive compliments, but became hostile when I did. It wasn't about lust, it was about control and projection. Those moments taught me how often lust becomes a cover for deeper emotional dynamics like insecurity, possessiveness, or fear of abandonment. Cultural insight. In social psychology, we know that jealousy and lust are separate emotions, but they often get tangled. When we don't talk about them clearly, they leak out as resentment. Self-reflection. Has someone else's confidence or sexuality ever triggered you? What might that reaction have revealed about your relationship with self-worth? Sacred lust and transformation spiritual traditions like Tantra or Taoism view lust not as dirty, but as sacred energy that, when mastered, can lead to transcendence, healing, or creativity. When unconscious, it leads to destruction. When integrated, it expands us. Personal reflection. I've made mistakes led by lust, mistaking attraction for alignment, but I've also grown from those mistakes. I now reflect before acting. I've learned to channel that energy into creativity, curiosity, and deeper emotional honesty. Lust isn't inherently good or bad, it's a signal. And signals only serve us when we understand them. Philosophical insight. Plato wrote that Eros erotic love could be a gateway to divine truth, not just pleasure. But it required restraint, intention, and wisdom. Self-reflection. Has lust ever helped you grow? Can you recall a time when desire connected you to your body, truth, or a deeper sense of aliveness? Final thoughts. Integrating lust without guilt. To integrate lust is not to indulge every desire, nor to suppress it into silence. Integration means recognizing lust for what it is, a signal, a messenger. Sometimes a misfiring of unmet emotional needs, other times a sacred flame that burns for connection, vitality, or creative life force. In the language of Jungian psychology, integrating shadow desires is not about purifying them, but becoming conscious of how they show up and reclaiming the energy they hold. Personal reflection. As I've matured, I no longer feel guilty for experiencing lust. I understand it as one part of a much wider spectrum of desire. There was a time when I might have wrestled with these feelings, questioning whether they made me less pure or more impulsive. But now I see that authentic connection requires honesty, and that includes honesty with ourselves about what we want, what we fear, and what we long for. I've learned that when lust arises without deeper connection, it often leaves a residue of emptiness. But when it's grounded in care, curiosity, and truth, it can bring profound clarity. I've become far more discerning, recognizing when attraction is genuine and when it's simply a momentary flicker of ego, loneliness, or novelty seeking. Psychological insight. Integration in internal family systems theory means making peace between parts of us, even those that seem contradictory. The part of us that wants connection and the part that seeks pleasure do not have to be at war. Self-reflection. Do you still carry guilt around your desires? What part of your relationship with lust still feels fragmented? How might you honor your desires without letting them lead you blindly? Integration prompt. Try journaling a conversation between two parts of yourself, the one that seeks lust and the one that fears or resents it. What would they say to each other if given the space to speak openly? Lust, like all shadow emotions, reveals more about our inner world than our outer one. It asks us to notice not just what we're drawn to, but why. Whether it's attention, affirmation, safety, or intimacy, the energy of lust points us towards something deeper. In a culture that often shames desire or sells it back to us in fragments, reclaiming it with awareness is an act of quiet rebellion. It doesn't mean giving in to every urge, nor does it mean suppressing the fire altogether. It means learning to listen, to honor, to understand. As we close today's episode, I invite you to sit with the parts of yourself that still feel conflicted about lust, your younger self, your wiser self, and the ones still learning in between. These parts are not enemies, they are threads of the same whole. This has been the Unfiltered Human on the Fringe. If this episode stirred something in you, curiosity, reflection, or even discomfort, sit with it, let it speak. That's where your growth begins. Until next time, stay grounded, stay honest, and keep walking toward the truth that's yours to live. James Miller. If you found value in today's episode, you may also be interested in my broader project, The Inversiverse, a series exploring the hidden architecture of perception, identity, control, and consciousness. Across 20 episodes, The Inversiverse dissects indoctrination, language, media manipulation, dark psychology, belief systems, and the evolution of self in the digital age. You can find all episodes of The Inversiverse on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, and Substack by searching this place called Earth. These ideas aren't shared to convince you, but to invite you to think, feel, and perceive more consciously in a world designed to keep you distracted. Overview of the Inversiverse, a journey through the mirrors of mind, culture, and control. Episodes 1 to 3 introduce foundational ideas around indoctrination, perception, and manipulation. Episode 4 explores how language, symbols, and cultural norms are used to shape thought. Episode 5 investigates control systems, media narratives, and the illusion of choice. Episodes 6 to 7 dives into collective belief structures and the psychology of mass behavior. Episode 8 focuses on marketing, control theory, game theory, and critical thinking. Episode 9 covers love, relationships, human mating, gender dynamics, and red-blue pill ideologies. Episode 10 unpacks dark psychology, the occult, Satanism, and the dark triad personality types. Episode 11 The Simulated Self examines identity, ego, and the rise of post-human consciousness. Episode 12 The Spell of the Mind inquires into language, illusion, and physiology of thought. Episode 13 Conscious Seduction journeys through persuasion, propaganda, and the unseen forces of the mind. Episode 14 The Myth of Sanity sheds light on madness, genius, and the edge of perception. Episode 15 The Algorithmic Mind probes influence, identity, and invisible architects. Episode 16 The Noise of Knowing reveals overload, obsession, and the age of infinite information. Episode 17 Belief Machines delves further into language, desire, and the engine of reality. Episode 18 Submerged Signals examines how the unseen shapes the self. Episode 19 The Alchemy Within Traces, Food Frequency, and the Forgotten Intelligence of the Body. Episode 20 Encoded Flesh scrutinizes and opens up to the forgotten language of the body, DNA, and biological consciousness.